features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.
Dark, grey, cloudy start today. The monkeys are shouting. A leopard is calling. This is Safari Live. Ready.
Standing by.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. You are live, you are live.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a very interesting start to our sunrise safari. Now, my name is Tristan, and on camera today I've got Senzo, and like I say, we've got monkeys alarm calling all over. We've heard a male leopard calling, and we found his tracks coming into this area, so I think it's Tingana. Now, it is quite dense and thick, so it's going to be a little bit of a tough one to find him, but we're going to try our best. Now, the most important part of this whole experience is you, the viewers, so we would love to hear from you. So remember, you can send through any questions that you may have about Africa or safari and any of the animals that we may see this morning, and you can send those through to #SafariLive. Now, without sitting around too much, let's see if we can maybe find where this male leopard has gone. The monkeys seem to be shouting and facing away from where I am, so a little bit further north of where I am. So I'm just going to try and see if I can sneak in here somewhere and try and get to where they are looking. It's quite difficult because it's very thick in here and lots of fallen over trees everywhere, so it makes life a little bit harder. And the other thing is that this male leopard is also going to be shying away from where the monkeys are alarm calling, and so it's also not going to help our cause very much. But while we search and while we look for where this leopard may be, let's go across to Ali so she can say good morning to all of you. Well, it seems like Ali may have a little bit of a signal issue, so maybe we won't go to Ali just yet. She's not just ready to say good morning, but our monkeys seem to be facing just into this direction here. Now, it's difficult because, as you can see in front of me, I've got this massive fallen over tree, so I don't really know how I'm going to get to where they're looking, but I'm going to try and see. I just wanted to watch the monkeys for a little bit just to see where they were actually facing. So they're in this tree on our left hand side over here. You can hear them shouting away, so they're very unhappy with this rude awakening that they've had this morning. Anytime a leopard's in the area, a monkey knows that it's got to be a little bit careful because a male leopard is a massive threat. So you can see them there. Are you very upset this morning? I'm sorry. But at least they're up in the tree. It's going to be very difficult for any leopard to get anywhere near them up there before that they spot them. And the reason why they're so high up in the tree is because they can see a long way from there. So it's a perfect place for them to look and to be able to detect predators. And now the shouting is just to warn everybody in this area. I've seen something. Be very careful. Don't hang around in this area. So it's a very clever tactic that they've got. But it seems now that they're facing the other way, now that they're facing southwards and away from us. So I'm just going to try and do some loops in this area and just see if I can't find anything. I'm sure this leopard must be somewhere close by. But he's being elusive. Now, if it is Tingana, I wonder what's happened to his carcass. I wonder if he maybe didn't drop it. He had to steal it. Because it could be that that's the case. Unfortunately, this afternoon when James was with him, that carcass looked as though it was sort of all bits and pieces and been dragged around quite a bit, so it's not impossible that it, unfortunately, as he was trying to reposition, just fell, and then the hyenas would have taken it very quickly. He also had a very good feed off it, so it was no real need for him to try and fight the hyenas back for a few scraps when he's already had such a nice feed. No, it's just trying to see where he would go from here. I was thinking that he might pop out towards sort of central. So Tracy, you wondering what is sawing? So sawing is when a leopard vocalizes. It's like the roar of a lion, so that's his territorial call, and it sounds like somebody sawing wood. That's why it's gotten the name sawing, and it is a very, very cool sound. It's one of my favorite sounds out here in the bush, and they make it often in the early hours of the morning or the late evening. And like I say, it's just to tell everybody else, this is my territory, this is where I'm dominant, stay out of my area so that we don't have to actually fight. And it's a clever way to do things, because if you're a male leopard, you don't really want to get into a situation where you've got to actually fight with another male. So I was just coming to check this water hole here, just in case he came here for water. You don't really want to get into an altercation with another male, in terms of you don't want to actually have to fight and use your claws and your teeth, because the chances of then being injured is quite real. So you find that they'll try and avoid that as much as possible, and they try then to vocalize and use their scent marking to keep other male leopards at bay and to make sure that they don't have to fight too much. But I don't know if he's come here. This is a very prominent game path that often the animals will use. You can see it comes past this water and then it carries on, and he often actually walks on this path. So I was checking here just to see if maybe he didn't come this way, but I'm going to go back to the main road in case he just came straight across this drainage line, because his tracks were on the other side of the drainage line coming in, and so we want to try and see if we can find them on this side. But he's being a bit sneaky, unfortunately, and this is the way it goes sometimes. Takes a bit of time, and it almost feels better when you have to work quite hard for it than when you just stumble upon them. I don't think he's come out of here yet. I wonder if he hasn't gone towards Twin Dam side. I see the monkeys have gone quiet now, so I think he's already past this area, but let's just see. We're going to head down a little bit, and if nothing comes out, then we'll turn around and go back. So, Laura, you're wondering if leopards can actually catch monkeys. Well, yes, they can. I've seen it a few times where a leopard has caught a monkey. It's generally not these males. The males tend to be a bit slow and a bit bulky to be able to catch a monkey in the trees that is quite quick and agile. You tend to find that it's more the female leopards and young males growing up, like Hosanna. He would be able to do it because he's young and fit and healthy and very, very agile. And what they do is they often will go into a tree and they try and get the monkey into a tree, something like this marula that we have on our right hand side here. That would be a kind of tree that they would try and get them in. And the reason why they would try to get them in there is you can see there's very little escape route for that monkey. So it can't jump to another tree because there's no real trees close to it. It's all kind of separated and isolated. And so they get them in there, and then they just basically chase them down in the tree itself. If the monkey's got other trees close to it, there's really very little chance the leopard's going to get anywhere near it. It's going to battle to get close and to be able to actually get that monkey, because of how quick and agile the monkeys are. Now, I thought maybe Tingana was going to pop out somewhere in this area, but alas, it doesn't seem like it. So I'm just going to go a little bit further forward in case he's gone past me. So I believe Ali has beaten her gremlins out of her vehicle and her signal, and is now ready to say good morning. So let's go to Ali so she can say hello.
Yes, we defeated the gremlins indeed, and we're able to bring you this beautiful picture of what it is like to wake up in Africa on a Monday morning. Not too bad, isn't it? My name is Ali, for the ones that didn't manage to catch it before the gremlins attacked us. And on camera here with me, I've got Craig.
So it appears that the gremlins are still attacking Ali, and she's still having a few issues there. So we shall carry on and forge forward for her and see if we can maybe find this leopard. Now, the problem is that the area that he's walking is almost impenetrable with the vehicle. It's very difficult to negotiate, and I'm sure he's somewhere here. It's just now going to be a case of waiting for him to maybe vocalize, or another animal to alarm call, or for him to try and come closer towards a road that we can actually find him again, because at this stage it's very difficult just to know where he is in the thicket like this. He could be zigzagging, he could be traversing in a different way, and it will make it very, very tough for us. But we shall persevere for sure. Other than that, it's a beautiful start to the day. It's a little bit overcast and cloudy, but the temperature is great. You can see I'm not even wearing a jersey this morning. So because of this cloud cover, it's almost insulating everything and keeping this sort of warm layer that's been rising from the land during the night. And it's actually a very pleasant start to the day. I have a feeling it's going to be one of those mornings, though, that's going to get colder the longer we go, which does happen. And the cloud base doesn't look as though it's that thick, so I would imagine by sort of 9-10 o'clock we're going to have a bit of sunshine and it's going to be a lot prettier day. But these overcast grey conditions are always great for nocturnal animals. So when you get conditions like this, you can often get really good sightings of the nocturnals, because they tend to stay out a little bit longer. It tends to be darker and sort of more gloomy for longer periods of the day, which makes it a lot easier for the predators to move around in without having to be found. So or without having the sort of beating sun and bright conditions that they don't like at all. So it's good conditions for us to be looking around. But I don't think Tingana could have gotten this far as to where we are now. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to turn around and just go back to where we were. Yeah, I think so. Let's turn around and then we'll come back down this loop. It seems like he was walking quite quickly, but we had Impala's alarm calling. We had, the monkey's alarm calling. So he's right there, but I don't think he could have covered this much distance in that quicker time. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to check that little drainage section again, because I feel like he might pop out there. And this is a route that he often walks. He takes this route here and this road that we're on now, and if he's traveling to the south. Otherwise, if he's going to go north, you'll find that he'll go and he'll come out just on the northern side of that little drainage that we had, and he'll go straight up Gowrie Cutline and up into Buffelshoek and onto sort of Cheetah Cutline and Buffelshoek boundary. So that's his normal kind of route that he takes. Now, I know some of the guys are trying to get hold of me to try and find out what's going on, so I'm just going to have to chat to them quickly. Taxon. Morning, it's just there's trucks for Tingana going into the drainage line just south of the dam wall, but I haven't been able to locate anything. It looks like he is going in a more south-easterly direction. I'm just checking now towards sort of Gowrie Cutline and Vubu Road just to check if there's any sign on the side. Yeah, I don't know if somebody wants to just check Twin Dams. Maybe he's come back that side. So the other guys are going to help me in this area, and they're going to also look around, which makes it much easier, because as they start to help us and move around, it means we can cover a lot more distance and see what's going on, and we can check on both sides of the drainage line for us, which is going to make life a lot easier. Now, myself and Ali are not the only two out here. James Hendry, the legend, is also on foot this morning, so he would like to say good morning, and hopefully he doesn't have any gremlin problems of his own.
The legend, well, that is very kind. To be cast amongst people like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Aristotle, and some fellow I was at university with who could down 12 beers in 3.5 minutes. Well, that's wonderful. My name is James Hendry. I'm not a legend in the slightest. Virma's on camera today, and we're as live as everyone else is. #Safari Live is how you get hold of us. So please do so during the course of the next 3 hours or so. You can ask us questions. You can send us comments. You can tell us what you want to see. I'll do my best to try and find them. But of course, well, nothing can be guaranteed out here. There we have our first animals of the day, 2 of them. One, the hippopotamus in the very far distance in the dam that is Twin Dams. Yes, I know it's confusing. I find it confusing myself. Anyway, there he is. He's a very shy hippopotamus. He will become increasingly less shy the more human beings approach him. And so we're not going to go too close to him. We're going to leave him be. And then our second animal of the day is a white-faced whistling duck. Can you see the white-faced whistling duck? And that white-faced whistling duck and its partner have made some little white-faced whistling ducks. And there it is whistling. And they are sort of getting big, if you like, in the puddles and ponds just to the other side of the dam wall there. And that's where Shongile was searching for things to eat the other day. And it is quite possible that that's what she's doing now. So we're going to go along there, have a look, and then we're going to head off to the east in the inexorable search for Shongile and Hosana's mother, the great Karula. Now, I was thinking as I lay in my bed this morning, the very first touches of the grey dawn coming to the sky, I thought to myself, you know what, there have been very few people on Torchwood of late. Most of them have been on, one or two on Buffelshoek, but Torchwood, of course, a private piece of land, vast piece of land. No one's been driving there for some time. So I wouldn't wonder if Karula, about whom we are all very worried, wasn't quietly sitting over there and enjoying many meals free of her two children. But time will tell. It's now been 4 weeks or so since we last saw her. We're going to head that way, and I believe that Ali is on her way to Cheetah Plains, and she will tell you about that now.
Good morning. Woo, we're in a bit of a this is almost like an emotional roller coaster in all senses. It seems like we've finally managed to beat off the gremlins. All we had to do was leave them behind at Djuma, and now we're heading onto Cheetah Plains, see what we can find there. Hopefully the Cheetah brothers have been there. Haven't seen them in quite a long time. And for everyone that's just joining, welcome. My name is Ali, and I've got Craig here in camera with me, and we're gonna try and get all the way over there and see what else we can find on this beautiful Monday morning that has started in a very interesting way for us. But I suppose we couldn't really do it if there wasn't a bit of bouncing on the road, crash cutting. It all makes for a more interesting Monday to me. So we'll carry on down this road. Hopefully we won't get lost and end up somewhere in Kruger National Park. Craig, I trust you'll know what to do. And we'll carry on going. Seems like the signal is holding. I wonder, because there's quite a bit of a cloud.
Well, we still have had no success with this leopard. I've checked up and down, can't find any tracks coming out. So he must be just moving parallel in this drainage line, which is unfortunately not negotiable all the way through. You kind of have to go in and out and in and out. So I want to now just quickly check the southern crossing from where we had him and just see if maybe he's not popped out there. And if nothing, then I'm going to go back onto Twin Dams and check around Chelopan in that area. Like I say, with these alarm calls, sometimes what will happen is a leopard will just change direction completely. It doesn't want to sit in that area and be shouted at and attention drawn to it. Remember, they're shy, reclusive animals, so yes, they allow us to get quite close to them and follow them, but that doesn't necessarily mean they want to be shouted at by all the different types of wildlife. And the reason for that is because, one, any sort of alarm call is going to attract the attention of other predators, so things like hyena, lions, other leopards are going to hear that and they're going to then zone in on that area. The other side of it is that if they are potentially hunting, lots of different prey animals will hear an alarm call and they'll then just move off, and they're not going to, let that leopard get into striking range because they're going to be far more aware of what's going on. Now, Cheryl, you say, can you tell the difference between a male and a female saw? Well, on a leopard? Well, yes, you can. I'm not very good at it, to be honest. There's some trackers that are very good and they can tell the difference between male and female, and it's generally because the male tends to be a lot louder than what the female's is. The female tends to be a much softer call because of just the size of the body. You can imagine the male's got much bigger lungs and a much bigger chest cavity, and he's able to then punch out the sound. So that's the main sort of difference. It also tends to be a lot more sort of deep and bassy from a male, much like us as people. Females tend to have slightly higher pitched voices and males tend to have slightly lower pitched voices. So that's the kind of main difference between them. But like I say, it's tough to actually know for sure. I've had many guides say it's a male leopard calling, and you eventually find this leopard and it's a female. So you tend to find that you can get it confused. The other thing is though is that a male leopard tends to call a lot more frequently than a female. Females generally only really calling if they feel like there's somebody in their area threatening their territory, or if they're actually trying to find a male to mate with. So females are calling much less than what the males are. The males tend to be calling a lot more as they sort of roam around their territory and try and sort of tell everybody that this is my area, my territory, stay away. Now if we don't get this right and we don't manage to find him just using the roads, what we might have to do is just stop and listen, because if he is calling, that call is going to travel quite loudly towards wherever we are, and we're going to be able to then find him using his call. So just going to have to listen carefully as well, also checking the roads very carefully, making sure he hasn't just crossed over, because sometimes what will happen is leopards will just cross straight over. Now the thing is with Tingana is he generally likes to walk on roads, so as soon as he's done doing whatever he is doing down in this little dip that he's in, he's going to end up, I'm sure, coming back onto a road and carrying on his patrol. So I'm hoping that we shall find him. But so far, very little sign. Oh, got some ducks that are busy coming over by the looks of it. I'm just trying to see which ducks these are. So you can see, there they go. Comb ducks, very nice. So these look like all female comb ducks, and unfortunately they're now disappearing behind the tree, and looks like they're going to go, in fact they're not comb ducks, I lie, sorry, they're Egyptian geese. That is a terrible call that I've just made. I'm so sorry, but yes, Egyptian geese, I think they're going off towards Twin Dams, that's where they're sort of heading, so I'm sure we will catch up with them as well a little bit later. Now, I just want to show you quickly a little antelope. We had a little duiker here that's just run off. Now I'm just trying to see if it's going to stop. It looks like it's stopped behind this bush, so I'm just going to sneak forward. Now this is potentially a prey item that Tingana would love to be hunting, because it's the perfect size for a leopard to be able to go after. So just give me 2 seconds. There we go. It's just stopped behind that bush there. Can you see it, Senzo? Oh no, it's now run away. There you can just see it's back in, just going behind the tree. I'm going to try see if we can get forward. They are quite shy, flighty little animals, but there we go. Hello, girl. So this is a little female. You can see she doesn't have any horns on top of her head. The male would have a nice little set of horns that are sort of very straight and protrude from the top of the head. And these females and males tend to be very, very skittish. They know that there's a lot of different predators out here that hunt them, and they know that they've got this grey coat that camouflages very well. And so that means that they'll run and they'll try and dive into thickets to try and get away from predators and to try and camouflage, and that's where their name comes from. So Duiker in Afrikaans is a diver, and it refers to the way that they sort of bounce around and then jump into a bush to try and then camouflage and dive into the thickets for camouflage. So it's a cool name given to them. Now where there is a female, generally there should be a male somewhere close by, because with the duiker they are monogamous, which means that they only have one mate for their entire life. So it's like a married couple that they get together and they stay together forever, unless unfortunately there is a divorce through predation, because if somebody like Tingana comes along and grabs the female or the male, they will then try and search out and find a mate somewhere else. Oh, I see the Ellies have been here, been doing a bit of damage. You can see they've pushed this tree over, which is not ideal. I'll have to fix that at some stage. It's quite a common practice for elephants. So Rebecca is asking me if there's any other names for animals that are Afrikaans or local names. Well, there is, but they are not really used by English people. So duiker is, I suppose, Steenbok is one. So a Steenbok is the smallest antelope that we see here in this particular section of the Kruger National Park. And a steen is in Afrikaans means a brick or a rock, and a bok means a buck. So it basically is a brick buck or a rock buck, and the reason why it's called that is because it spends most of its time curled up in a ball if it's being hunted, and it tries to camouflage itself as a little rock in the ground. And it's actually quite amazing when they do sit. They've got this kind of rusty colored coat, and they just kind of tuck everything in, and it's just this sort of little rusty sort of ball in the grass, and it actually does look just like a stone or a rock, and so very, very clever camouflage tactic. The other ones, I suppose klipspringer. So klipspringers, we don't really see them here, although I saw one near Simbambili last year. A klipspringer is called, basically is a Afrikaans name, so klip is Afrikaans for a rock or a stone again, and a springer is basically something that jumps, so it's called a rock jumper, and that's because the klipspringer likes to stay on rocky outcrops and it jumps from rock to rock as it goes. So it's quite an interesting little animal. Now I'm sure I've got a picture of one here somewhere, so I'm going to try and see if I can find it for you, just to show you what these different animals look like. It might take me a few seconds, so I do apologize. But other than that, most of the animals do have names in Afrikaans or the local languages that are different to what the English name is, but the animal itself is not known as that. It's only known in those sort of names by those cultures. Klipspringer, Steenbok, Duiker are the only ones that are used universally that are different languages and are able to be applied into English. Now, I'm trying to find our little klipspringer. There we go, I found our klipspringer. Now, unfortunately, my book has got some water damage, but there we go. That's a little klipspringer. So you can see it looks quite similar to what a duiker looks like. It's got this sort of grey animal like this that you will see on the duiker as well, except that these guys have slightly longer horns, and they've got this very sort of stout, cute little face that's sort of squashed in, and then they've got very specialized hooves. So if you look at the hooves on the klipspringer, they're a little bit different. So down at the bottom here on the legs, yes, there we go. So those hooves, you can see they don't stand like a normal antelope. They're almost standing on their tippy toes. And these little hooves here are actually quite rubbery in texture, and that provides grip on the rocks that they bounce around, because they don't actually spend too much time out in the grassland. It's always on rocks like this, and they're able to grip. Now, consulting detective, you want to know the difference between a Steenbok and a Duiker. I'm going to try and find the two of them for you so that I can show you, and we actually have them both here. There we go. Alright, so on the right hand side is the Duiker, which we just saw now. It's a small little grey antelope, and it is the one on the right hand side. There we go. It is a small grey antelope like this, alright, and you can see it's got these little black lines that come down on the legs. They've got, the males have horns, much like any of the small antelopes. Males will have horns. This guy has a bit of a deformed horn, actually. If you look at that, it doesn't normally look like that. And then they've got these sort of little grey and black faces with a little black nose. Alright, so that is the duiker there. And then on the other side, we've got the Steenbok, which looks like this. You can see it's more red in coloration. So it's got that red sort of rusty color, quite large ears, and the large ears are because this animal is slightly smaller, and when it lies down or when it's walking through the grass, it's very difficult to see predators. So it has these large ears to be able to hear what's going on rather than see what's going on, and so very, very big ears. And then, like I say, that rusty red color that you see, which is quite diagnostic for them. Now, the only animal that you could potentially confuse this with would be a Sharp's Grysbok. Now, a Sharp's Grysbok is a tiny little antelope that is occurs in the Kruger National Park. We don't see it down here, although it's possible. You never know, one of these antelope could come through, and they basically look exactly the same as a Steenbok, except they're slightly smaller, and they look like old men because they've got these sort of grey flecks in their coat. So instead of having the uniform red like you see on the Steenbok, they would have little grey pieces of hair inside here, and it looks like they're a very, very old Steenbok, and they are, like I say, just a little bit smaller. So unfortunately we don't get them here, but they're very cute little antelope. And that's it. So Nev, you're wondering what a blesbok is. Well, it's another type of antelope that we do get in South Africa. We get two types of antelope that look very similar, a blesbok and a bontebok. Now, both of them are generally animals that occur in the Highveld of South Africa, which, when we refer to the Highveld, we're referring to the sort of sort of higher levels of South Africa. So if you go up towards Johannesburg and the Central Plateau, that's where we're talking about. So you get them a lot there, and then down into the Cape, so down to Eastern Cape and into the Western Cape. Now, I don't think I've got a picture of them here in this particular book. Let me just see if I've got another book with me that I could potentially use to show you what they actually look like. They are incredibly beautiful animals. Right, so while I try and find my book to show you what this Bless book and Bonte book look like, let's go across to James and see how he's doing on his walk and whether he's managed to discover anything interesting as he lopes around the African bush.
Found an astounding looking creature. There it is, on the end of that thorn. Now, I, to my ultimate shame, called one of these a fly the other day, and I thought that it was a fly sort of mimicking a wasp, and then I believe one of our very astute viewers actually found this creature in some sort of entomological text, and it is a wasp, if I'm not mistaken, and I forget exactly what kind of wasp it is, but there it is, lurking on the edge of this thorn, waiting for a bit of warmth so that it might fly away and do the dastardly waspish things that it does. I'm not sure exactly what they are. I don't know anything else about the biology of this creature, but it is quite spectacular, isn't it? I suspect those long legs must be used perhaps a little bit like a dragonfly's long legs are used as a basket for scooping up prey. The biting flies are in evidence, obviously. They are savaging me as we speak. And they'll be savaging Viam soon, and then the camera will start knocking up and down. Isn't that an amazing wasp? Hello, wasp. I'm so tempted to sort of take him by the abdomen and pick him up and look at him, but I think I might get myself quite nastily stung. Now remember, of course, the wasps are stingers only by sex, so the females are the only wasps that are able to sting. Males cannot, and that's because males, of course, do not have ovipositors, in other words, the apparatus through which eggs are laid, which is not surprising for males. They sting you, yes, correct, Viam. Viam said so. They sting you with the egg layer thingy, and that is absolutely correct. They do indeed sting you with the egg layer thingy, aka the ovipositor. Same as a bee, Viam. A bee's sting is the modified ovipositor. Then there is something else here. Stay where you are, Wumbi. I saw it here. Whether I will see it again, however. Oh, Nancy H., you want to know how big that wasp is? Well, this is what I want. There's an assassin bug here. Let's just go. Well, if I'll put my thumb next to the assassin bug, and the wasp, Nancy H., is about the length of my thumb. Between my thumbnail and where my forefinger is touching my thumb. That's about the length of the wasp. So you can see the size of this assassin bug now. Oh, they are such remarkably moving creatures, aren't they? And the colour's such a warning to anything that might want to eat them or harass them. That bug to me just screams, "Don't touch me. You'll be in big trouble if you do." Well, very much like a leopard, yes, except a leopard doesn't inject you with a poison, whereas this bug will, and that poison will hurt horribly. I've never been stung by one, or not stung, that would be the wrong term. I've never been sort of assaulted by one. They stick their proboscises into you and then push a whole lot of sort of violent enzymes into your body, which will then create very extreme localized pain. I don't think it's anything as bad as, say, a scorpion bite, but it is quite nasty. And Steph has been bitten by one, and he says that it is a very, very unpleasant experience. Now, Laura Moore, you say, what is the difference between a hymenopterid like this wasp that dies after one sting compared with something that dies or that can sting repeatedly? Well, with a bee, Laura, only bees die after stinging you. And what they do is, of course, they've got a barb on the end of the sting, they put it into you, and then when they fly off, when that sting is left in you, it kind of sucks most of the insides of the bee out, and the little poison sac on it tends to draw most of the insides of the bee out, and that's why the bee dies after it stings you. With most of the rest of these creatures that sting, they don't actually leave the poison sac or leave the sting in the victim. What they do is they sting, they inject a poison, and then they fly away. So it's a slightly more, I guess, modern way of looking after the same problem. Bees, of course, live entirely, though, in colonies, and because they are, this is quite an interesting actually discussion as to why they should have developed these two strategies, one of which can sting repeatedly and one of which cannot. In a bee colony, the workers are what we call haploid. In other words, they have only one half of each chromosome. They're not viable. They're female. They're all female, and they're not viable, which means they cannot lay eggs. They can never breed. They're totally sterile, which means that their role is really part of the greater organism of the hive. They cannot survive as organisms on their own. They cannot perpetuate a genetic legacy on their own, which means that by sacrificing themselves, they're not actually detracting from the genetic legacy that the hive will pass on to the next generations, or that the queen will pass on to the next generations, because they're almost clones of each other. Well, they're not clones of each other, but they're almost identical to each other, the worker bees. With a wasp, that's different. The wasps live as individuals. A few of them live in colonies, but they'll all breed within a colony. They're not haploid at all. They're both diploid, which means they both contain both copies of the chromosomes, which means that they are then viable and they're able to breed. And because they're able to breed, it would be pointless for them to sacrifice themselves every time they needed to defend themselves if they died. That wouldn't make any sense. The only reason it makes sense for a worker bee to die when it stings is that it has no breeding function, which I think is quite interesting. So that's a very good question, a lovely discussion to have. Right, we're on the fire break now between the southern boundary to my right and your left now, and the northern sides of Djuma to my left and your right. And we are going to go and do a little patrol along this boundary area and see if we can't pick up some tracks and whatever else interesting there might be. Tristan apparently is still searching for Tingana. There's still monkeys alarm calling around about the Vuyatela Dam, so maybe he'll have some luck, but he'll tell you about that now.
So indeed they are. So we're trying to find a way just to get back to where those monkeys are. Maybe he just laid down somewhere there and we're driving around trying to wait for him to come out and he's just sitting. So just going back down in towards where the monkeys were alarm calling, just to go and see if maybe, just maybe, we can find him lying down somewhere, which would really be a big help. I don't see any of his tracks coming up back towards Twin Dams, so he must be somewhere here. Now the problem is I think the elephants have destroyed our crossing. They have indeed, but it looks like we may be able to get in here. So let's just try and see. Now, before maybe we negotiate all of this, I should just quickly show you the difference between the Blesbok and the Bontebok, which we were talking about earlier. So I'm just going to try and get down here and level out before we do that. There we go. Right, so from here I'll also be able to hear if the monkeys alarm call again, which is good. Right, so we've got our Blesbok and Bontebok are these two at the bottom here on the right hand side. So this one over here is your Blesbok on the left. Alright, and you can see, as it says there, it's got a broken white facial blaze. So they've got this kind of white on their noses going up to the horns. And on a Blesbok, you'll find that there's this break in between. Alright, and so that's the difference. On the Bontebok, which is the one on the right hand side here, you can see the white goes all the way through, and there is no break between the white on the nose and the white coming from the horns. It also tends to be a bit of a darker animal. You find the Bontebok tends to be a bit more sort of black brown coloration than what the Blesbok is. The Blesbok tends to be a lot more light brown in color. But these are the two that we see, and so for those of you that were interested in what these are, this is them. Now, unfortunately, they don't occur in the Kruger Park area, but they do occur down in the Cape. That's where they're mostly seen, and then, like I say, onto the plateau, so Free State into Johannesburg and those areas, you do find them around there. Very, very pretty little antelopes, though, and unfortunately, they are hunted quite extensively. So I know a number of people that have had them in their areas, on their farms, and where they've had predators, and find the leopards go after their young ones, caracal go after the young ones a lot as well. So it's quite a bit. Now we're going to see if we can negotiate. So James, you're saying with more water that we have around at the moment, are we more likely to see more antelope? Well, no, not necessarily. We're more likely to see certain species of antelope, yes. So things like zebra, wildebeest, those kind of animals, they like water and short grass, so you tend to find them a lot. Things like eland, roan, sable are not hugely water dependent, and they actually occur more in arid areas, so you don't see them nearly as much in wet areas as you would see them in drier areas, so we won't see too much of those guys. But you must also remember that when we say more water, we're now pretty much at our average. We're not really got that much more water than we should have, so it is still quite dry. We haven't had nearly as much as we should have and what we need, so it is still very, very dry in that regard. Now, I'm just trying to see if I can find anywhere where this leopard could be lying. He is another story, Tingana. He likes to find little nooks and crannies that he can get into that makes it very difficult for us to find him. But alas, there's nothing here. There is a pretty bird though up on this tree. So we've got a crested barbet that is sitting on it's just flown away, don't worry. So sorry, it was sitting on the tree nicely and it just flew away, so we shall try again. It seems like this is what's happening to us this morning. We're having sort of everything around us, but just can't get it onto the camera this morning. It goes that way though. You sometimes have these kind of days where you'll try and find things and they make you work for it. Now the good thing is the sun is coming out. Now when the sun comes out, it does sometimes mean that you'll find that some of the predators that like Tingana may be lying down somewhere, and the sun starts to hit him and he'll get a little bit warm, and then he'll start to move and walk, which will be good for us. But alas, there's nothing here that I can see. Now we're south of where those tracks were, so I was thinking that maybe he carried on and moved into this area, but it doesn't seem like it. I looked in the riverbed when we went through there. Now there was no visible sign. And the other side of this is that it's so thick in here with so many fallen over trees that it's quite difficult to actually move around. But we're going to try and see if we can potentially get ourselves through this thicket. Never know, maybe we'll bump into a leopard on the way, which would be quite nice. Just careful there, Senzo, watch yourself. It's going to be a bit thick through this. I'm trying not to hit myself in the face as well, because that's not going to be very pleasant. Now there used to be all these 2 tracks through here and sort of pathways, and during the drought I know Herbie was telling me that there was lots of tracks and it was very easy to negotiate this area. In fact, you can actually see this is almost a track that we're on now. But after all the rain that we had and a bit of growth that we've had, all these 2 tracks are starting to disappear. And the other day I was with Herbie and he was trying to find me this 2 track, and he was battling. He was saying no, it's grown too much to be able to see what's going on. Now we're going to keep trying and keep seeing what we can find. There are some beautiful trees here, so maybe Tingana is lazing in the boughs of one of them. And while we do that, let's go back to James and see what else he's managed to conjure up on his walk.
I mean, there certainly is an advantage to a drought, there's no question about it, but on the big game front, I suppose, the drought becomes slightly advantageous to finding animals, but then on the small game front, such as this acrea that you're looking at now, well, inescapably not good in a drought. Good rains bring with them good vegetation, which in turn brings with it a lot of very fascinating smaller creatures like that acrea. And over here is the acrea's caterpillar. Now, Cindy, you want to know if any of the animals see in colour? And the answer must be an assured yes, if any of the animals are colourful. And so you can figure out which animals can see in colour pretty much from seeing which animals are colourful. Now, that means, of course, many people use the term animal when they mean mammal. And I think maybe I don't know if you're referring to everything from the smallest woodlouse up to the biggest elephant. Those are animals, of course. Or if you're just referring to mammals. In terms of the mammals, very few, the primates being noticeable exceptions, and I think you'll find that the monkeys are able to see in colour. How do we know that? Well, they can test that these days by looking at the eyes and testing what's in the different cells that are in the eyes. But also, a monkey, interestingly, in Afrikaans is known as die blou aap. And die blou aap, which means blue monkey, gets its name from the fact that the males have got bright blue testicles. And there would be no reason for those bright blue testicles were it not for the fact that the rest of them can see that they are bright blue. So you can be pretty sure that monkeys can see in colour. Now, by the same token, you can tell that birds must be able to see in colour. Why else would there be those bright colours if they weren't able to utilise them and see what colours they were? That's the cuckoo flying past us. And so that's a nice way of checking whether an animal can see in colour. And then you have the butterflies. Why are they coloured? Well, is it to attract each other? No, most likely not, except if they give off some kind of ultraviolet, radiation. And if we look at something like an acrea species or a monarch species, which is orange and black, the need for them to be that colour, like this one over here, which is now just warming up the hemolith in its wings so that it can fly away. The reason it's that colour, however, is not so that it may attract other acreas, it's to warn off predators. It says to predators, I am poisonous, stay away from me. And apparently they get their poison from the hydrogen cyanide that is sequestered by the Waltheria plants on which this very butterfly is sitting. So, can some butterflies see in colour? I don't think like we can, but of course many insects can see in ultraviolet. And ultraviolet, of course, is a range of colours too high, or the frequency of the light waves is too high for us to see. It's beyond our visual range. But many insects can see those colours, and they can see them in blue flowers. And if you look at something like a foxglove, for example, which has got what look like purple strips coming out of the front, which entice insects into them, so that they go up into the flower, pick up pollen on the back, turn around and fly out again, and that's how the plants get flowered or get pollinated. Those stripes of purple and the different colours that flowers have must be picked up in some way by the insects, but we think they pick up the ultraviolet reflection much rather than the colours that you and I are seeing. So they do see in a form of colour. It will be just very different from the colour that we see. Let's continue a walk. Red Fire Queen, you say, is colour blindness just a human thing? Well, I mean, I'm not very clued up on exactly the definition of colour blindness, but we do know, of course, that colour blindness is not somebody who sees in black and white. Colour blindness is somebody who differentiates, in human beings anyway, who cannot differentiate between reds and greens. I think that is that's the major definition. So you can go to Google and you can Google colorblind test, and you can actually check if you're colorblind right now. You can go to Google, you can check the test, and they'll give you an image which is made of green or purple bubbles, and inside the purple bubbles will be a number in green bubbles. And if you can read the number, then you're not colorblind, and those who are colorblind cannot read the number. And So colour blindness like that, I believe, is probably not unique to human beings. I'm sure there must be some birds who have that sort of colour blindness. But colour blindness in things like in the rest of the mammals, so in the cats, for example, is not, I mean, they are completely colourblind. But they don't see in black and white. They also see in various shades of red and green. And it's one of the reasons that we think things like impala, hartebeest, blesbok are a rich russet red colour, which to us are very obvious colours walking through the greenery like this, but to a lion or a leopard are not obvious colours at all. They're actually quite difficult to see. And so they're an effective camouflage colour to be if your predator happens to be colourblind. So I hope that answers your question. But to define whether the colour blindness in a cat is the same as it is in a human being, I'm afraid I don't know. I suspect it probably is. But does it mean that a human being who's colourblind can see better at night? I'm not sure. I really wouldn't know. I'm not colourblind, luckily. I have many other visual problems, but colour blindness is not one of them. Right, Tristan, I believe, is going to tell you something interesting now.
I am indeed, James. Well, I hope I'm going to say things that are interesting. Although at the moment I don't have too much to tell you other than that I've just negotiated the depths of hell to try and get through that block. It was not very pleasant at all. The elephants have been very naughty. They've pushed over trees everywhere and it's made it very difficult to get through there. But alas, no signs of Tingana either. So it seems like he has found somewhere to lie down in all of this, and he's probably enjoying a fat sleep in the nice morning sort of warmth, and we're just driving around him like idiots at this stage, but we shall find him. We shall see where he is. Now, I'm surprised that he didn't come out because he seemed to be moving. So, Ricky, you're wondering if a leopard would change its territory on its own. Well, no, there wouldn't just be a sort of just decide to leave my area and go away. A leopard has a territory and it knows that territory intricately, and it's going to know where there's food, where there's water. So the only way that it's going to be pushed or try and go away from that territory is if it's pushed. So if you find there's another male that's in the area, or potentially a female that's in heat somewhere else, that he's going to then go and try and actively look for. Also, you'll find that sometimes with males, if they get to a situation where they feel like there's no pressure around them, then sometimes they'll try and go and head into those areas to try and see if they can expand their territory. So that's maybe going into a new area, but it's not actually setting up a brand new territory. So we'll just have to see. But yeah, like I say, they're not going to just go and find their own territory for the sake of it. Sorry, I thought I just saw something there. That's why my train of thought went a little bit awry. I thought I saw a leopard basking in the sun, but it's not. It's just a tree stump by the looks of it, which is not what we wanted. We wanted to see the leopard, so that's a bit of a sad thought. I'm going to go to where the last tracks were and just see if we can't find him lying somewhere there. Maybe we just drove past him in the gloom and darkness that was this morning. So I'm going to just go and have a little look now and have a check just to make sure. And if we don't have anything from there, I think we're probably going to carry on and see what else we can find. We've been in this area most of the morning. So Daniel, all the way from Scotland. I hope it's not too cold up there today. You want to know when leopards will start to soar? Well, it's normally to do with territory. So you'll find a female starts to soar when she first goes into her first estrus cycles, which it depends on the females. I mean, if you take Karula, for example, she was already mating at just over 2 years old, so she would have started vocalizing already then, whereas males, it tends to be a little bit later. They tend to only start vocalizing when they're territorial, which is normally around 5 years old. So from about sort of 4.5, 5, they start to soar, but otherwise it's the females that start much earlier than the males. The reason why the males start so much later is any sawing that they make is telling everybody that they're there. So they're saying that I am a male, I'm here, this is a territory that I'm competing for, because sawing is not just for the sake of it. It's not just because they like to make the sound. It's to serve a purpose. It's to tell everybody that, you know, I'm here, I'm wanting to challenge or mate in this area, and therefore sends a clear signal. So males don't want to attract attention to themselves until they're big enough and strong enough to compete for those territories, and that's when you'll find them actually going and sort of making the noise. Now the last track goes straight through here in this direction. So Winter Prism, you're wondering if a leopard's calls to her cubs would be considered as sawing? No, that's different. A sawing sound is that deep, heavy vocalizing, whereas sawing tends to be more on the sort of, contact calling tends to be a low sort of frequency, and it's not designed to make a lot of noise. It's designed so that any sort of leopard that's very close can hear them, but otherwise it's to be quiet so that they don't attract too much attention, because they don't want other predators to hear them calling and come and investigate, and their cubs then are right there. Just trying to see. So this is where the last tracks go. They go straight down here. I'm trying to see if there's a way that we could actually get to where it is, but it looks as though it's far too deep. You can actually see where I was this morning, and I stopped here, and maybe, just maybe, this leopard is just lying down below here. I just want to check if there's maybe a way through. There is actually a little track here, which is quite nice, so this is good news. Hopefully, like I say, he's lying in here somewhere, because this is exactly where the last tracks went and where he kind of was going down towards. So maybe he's just found himself a nice little thicket here to lie down, and that's where he is. I also know there's quite a few pans inside here, and so when there's a few pan systems, often you'll find cats will find a pan, drink, and then they lie quite close to it after that, especially in Tingana's case, because, you know, he had this kill and he was able to feed quite a bit. Oh, there's a bit of a ditch there that we're going to have to get out of. So, while we try to get out of our ditch, because we're in quite a deep one, we're going to go across to James and see where he is and what he's up to.
Where we are is on the eastern boundary now, hoping for some Karula tracks. I'm going to ask Viam to come back here. Sorry, Viam. I was going to walk towards him, sort of saunter in a heroic fashion, but I'm not going to do that anymore because I found something to look at. Well done, Viam. You did the heroic walking this time, and you did it very nicely. Good. Over here, we've got a pupa, or chrysalis. And that must be one of the acreas, because it's on one of these Waltherias, the plant that keeps on giving. And just behind it is actually a caterpillar. But isn't that amazing? I don't know which acrea it's going to be. And of course some will make a silky cocoon around themselves. Many of the moths will do that, including of course the silkworm, which created a massive, massive industry. But these do not make cocoons around themselves. They're protected purely by the hard shell of the chrysalis. Hard, it's very hard. Isn't that amazing? If you are wondering where Ali has disappeared to, it is not that she has gone into the bowels of Cheetah Plains. Unfortunately, Jigger seems to be malfunctioning again, and will shortly, hopefully, be fixed, and she'll be back out fairly soon. Right, let us continue. Laura, you're wondering what my favourite the The cicada is my favorite insect. Obviously, the cicada is a ridiculous thing to say because there are countless species of cicada. And so I think that you will find, any cicada that sits in the summertime and makes its lovely summery call, always makes me takes me back to childhood days, travelling down to the coast from the city on my Christmas holidays, stopping on the side of the road in the heat of the Karoo, which is a sort of semi-desert area in the middle of South Africa, or walking through the dune bush in the sort of coastal summer afternoons and that sort of thing, and just the sound of that cicada makes me feel very at peace and very happy. So that's why a cicada is my favourite. In terms of looks, however, a cicada is not necessarily the best looking insect. I'd say probably the best looking insect, by my reckoning, is something called a purple banded weevil. Now, it's relatively subtle coloured in that it's pink and purple, so it doesn't have a great array of colours like the rainbow shield bug that we had the other day, that Brent actually had one yesterday as well. But it's got such a lovely combination of colours. Of course, remember that Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat wasn't necessarily the most fashionable item of the times. It was just the most colourful. And so for me, although the rainbow shield bug is very much like Joseph in his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, the purple banded weevil, I think, has got the most harmonious arrangement of colours, if you like, as does the, what's it called, a royal fruit chaffer, which is green and white, or sort of creamish off-white and green with a bit of black thrown in. I also think it's a wonderful combination of colours, and so I quite like them as well. So those, I suppose, would be three of my favourite insects, but the cicada for me definitely is my favourite. My worst insect, Vian, what's your worst insect? The centipede.
Not anymore.
What is your worst?
I like centipedes now.
Do you?
Yes.
You like centipedes now?
Stinging ants like the hissing ants.
Stinging ants like the hissing ants would be your least favourite. My least favourite is the biting fly, followed closely by the mosquito. Yes, a mosquito's a good one. Now, Brian, you're wondering if you can eat a cicada. Brian, I imagine you probably could eat a cicada. Would you want to eat a cicada? I seriously doubt that you would want to eat a cicada. There's not much meat to them. I have no doubt you could eat one if you were desperate enough, however. Let's have a look at this flower down here. Beautiful white flower, and I have no idea what it is, naturally. I feel like I should know because I don't think it's uncommon around here. Anyway, there it is. If you have any ideas, let us know. #SafariLive, of course. That's the best way to do that. And I will tell you that it has got a completely square stem. A completely square stem, which is unusual and probably diagnostic. Then there's this other plant here. And I told you a story about this plant a little while back, and I've still failed to find what it is. It's not uncommon around here. It's the very first flower that I ever picked as a young student, and I had no idea what it was, and our guide didn't know what it was, and I said I'd find out from the botany department of the university, and I, of course, did not, because when you're at university, you're just, especially me, I tended to be rather useless at following through on things, because there were just so many interesting other things to be doing, other than finding out what flowers were. Now, Marco, you're wondering about katydids, and if we get them in this area. We do. They tend to be much more a height of summer animal. A katydid, everybody, is a kind of a grasshopper, which has got a very long saw-like ovipositor, which it uses to dig holes in the ground. And then it lays its eggs in those holes. And they're often disguised beautifully as leaves. They look exactly like leaves, and so that was what a katydid is, and yes, we do get quite a lot of them, largely in the height of the summer, when it's really quite wet. Now we get lots of the grasshoppers. The grasshoppers are just sort of starting to die off now. They're laying their eggs. The adults are sort of lying in their retirement beds, thinking how wonderful the summer has been, and weren't they so lucky to have a summer like this, on the only summer that they're allowed to be alive, because they only survive one season. Now you may or may not be able to hear birds calling. There were oxpeckers that were in that dead tree over there. I'm sure they're nesting there. And the reason that Herbert is nowhere around us checking for things like buffalo is that he's obviously found out that they were nesting in the tree as opposed to trying to find themselves something to eat on the back of an antelope or buffalo. Right, I believe that Tristan has got some sad news for you, and he's going to give it to you now.
Well, sad for us indeed is that Tingana is somewhere in that thicket. It's just impossible to negotiate with the vehicle, so unfortunately we're going to leave him there and carry on and move out of the area and see what else we can go and find, which may be sad in that we don't get to see him, but we have had a really good couple days with him. We had that beautiful sighting on Arathusa where he was making friends with elephants and rhinos, and then we had him on that kill yesterday the whole day, so we can't be too sad, and who knows, maybe this is going to lead us to something better and bigger and greater, so we shall try and see what else we can find. Now, I did find where his tracks carried on in the drainage line, but it was unfortunately just keeping going into an area that I just couldn't get to, so it goes into this big tambuti thicket, which for those of you who don't know what a tambuti is this massive sort of, well, not massive, but they're the types of tree that grows in this area. It's particularly in riverbed systems, and they tend to grow in sort of stands together, almost like a plantation, where they're all right up next to each other, and it makes it very difficult to get a car anywhere near there or through there. So unfortunately, it's great for a leopard because it's shady, it's dappled light, so difficult for prey animals to see them, and there tends to be quite a lot of prey animals around tambuti stands, and the reason for that is because the tambuti has a latex that comes out of it. So if you pick a leaf, you'll see this white latex, and I'm going to try to see if I can find one for you, and that white latex is toxic to people, but in an antelope it helps with their digestive tract, so it helps them to get rid of a lot of the bad elements of the food that they eat and stuff that they're unable to digest. When you eat things like leaves, there's a lot of sort of fibrous material and cellulose that doesn't break down very easily, and so clogs up the gut and sort of the system a little bit, and so eating that tambuti just helps to get rid of all of those sort of built up bits of fiber. And so you find that things like kudu, nyala, giraffe, bushbuck, impalas, they spend a lot of time in those areas actually feeding off the tambuti. And so if you're a leopard, it's a place where you're going to find food as well as really great sort of an area to camouflage. So it's the perfect place for a leopard to go to. And if there's no food around there, it's great just to have a nap in there. So it makes sense why Tingana's gone there. Now, I wonder where he's going to go from there, because now it's interesting. Generally when he goes south and when he heads back towards Little Gari, he normally takes Weaver's Nest Road, which is a little bit further to our west, and he heads south down there. When he comes this way and towards sort of Gari Dam, then generally he goes onto Central and then up onto Gari Cutline, but he hasn't come out on that side, so I'm going to be interested to see which way he goes from here. He hasn't patrolled the northern side for a few days now. After he found that carcass, he's been heading more sort of south, so it'll be interesting to see which way he goes from here. But I was kind of secretly hoping that he was going to come out onto a road and I was going to find his footprints, but alas, hasn't happened, and unfortunately that's the way it goes. But it is a beautiful morning, and there's this sort of, the sun is just being filtered by the clouds, so it's not really bright, it's just casting this sort of nice soft light over the bush. And when you're in areas like this, in these riverbed sections, it is absolutely beautiful. So it's really, really nice just to be driving and just to be listening to all the sounds of nature, and to be out and about in the fresh air is always good. And on top of that, it's been a really warm start to the day, so it's been very pleasant. I'm thoroughly loving the fact that I'm not in a jersey this morning. I'm trying to cling to summer as best that I can, because winter seems to be encroaching with a rapid rate, and it's not ideal at all. I think what we'll do is go check twin dams. So we're going to go and try and see if maybe there's any sign of little Shongile while we're down that way. She maybe has sneaked back for another terrapin. She's been on a terrapin mission, and even though it doesn't seem like the right thing for her, and that, terrapin doesn't seem like the tastiest morsel, I suppose if you're a leopard and you don't have anything else, it's a way of getting by. And we were talking about it last night, she's not exactly starving, she's not emaciated, so she seems to be doing just fine. And these terrapins, if you can get 2 or 3 a day, and that's quite a bit of meat that she's getting. A lot of effort to get through the shell, but she's still getting a lot of meat, and she's able to then find the nutrients she needs to survive. So I think little Shongile will. It seems Hosana has taken to being on his own like a far more comfortable than his.
Impala. Hello everybody, we're just trying to find some impala here. Sorry about that crash cut. It does happen from time to time, especially on days like this when it seems both vehicles are struggling with signal. Anyway, on walk we have signal, and there are some impala in here that are making a loud, alarm calling noise. Herbert reckons they're alarming at us, and he thinks that they're alarm calling at us because something has freaked them out somewhere along the line. I don't know. They've now stopped, unfortunately. I got extremely hopeful when I heard them alarming. I thought, well, here we go. But there are no tracks, and they were looking directly at us, and they've now moved off into the bush. So I don't think it's Karula, alas, and alack. But the light is very pretty, so let's have a look at this flower in the gorgeous light. Vian, would you like me to walk heroically through this grass? Then I will look heroic in the backlight. You like some backlight, don't you? All right, and then what we'll do is we'll finish up on this flower. Okay, so I will walk this way, and I will walk heroically backlit through the grass, and then we will look at the flower. Are you ready, Vian? Say action when you're ready. There we go. Heroic. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I just had to try it. Here's the flower. Beautiful hibiscus flower. Isn't that lovely? And apparently, while we look at this hibiscus flower, Judy H., you reckon that white flower was something called Leucas glabrata, something like that. Can you spell Leucas for me, please, Rebecca? L-E-U-C-A-S, Leucas glabrata. Yeah. Well, it could well be. Thank you very much, Judy H. You've yet to let me down on these, so I'm going to believe you and say Leucas glabrata is what it is, and I'm assuming that you will have included me on that tweet so I can go and look it up in a book afterwards. Thank you very much. Here we've got some lovely purple flowers. They're not flowers. We've got some lovely purple seeds. Now, we were talking about colour recently, and what would the point of this panicum bush, yes? What would the point of this panicum grass having purple seeds be? Why would they be purple? And I'm not sure what spreads panicum seeds other than creatures that put them through the digestive system. So I suspect that something, perhaps birds, in fact almost certainly things like red-billed quailias and waxbills, they would come and eat these seeds, and in getting rid of them, exuding them from the bottom, I suspect they'll probably germinate. Perhaps. So I think that might be why they're purple. Now the whole point of colour, of course, is almost always to, if you're not trying to ward off predators, it's almost always to attract pollinators or to attract something, to attract a mate. And it's expensive to make colour. So there's very little out here that would be coloured, but for a very specific purpose. And so that's why the purple colours on these panicum seeds are interesting, because they are there for a reason. To make a purple pigment would not be cheap. It would be much cheaper for everything to just be brown. And then also over here, on the end of this cat's tail, look at that little beetle. Isn't that nice? I can never remember the name of the cat's tail. VM, do you remember its botanical name? Cat's tail?
Felis talicus.
No, it's
Boticus.
not. No, not Felis talus boticus. No, that is incorrect. It'll come to me sometime. Anyway. What is it? Oh. And here we go with some more purple flowers. These, of course, are the flowers of Vernonia. And they're quite aromatic. They've got nice aromatic leaves. Not quite as aromatic as the purple panweed, for which these are sometimes confused. Very nice. I'll tell you, try and describe it to you. Sort of spicy, but verdant. It smells like a sort of summer forest, if you like. That's very nice. Okay, on we go. Let's continue up here. Poor old Herbert is hoping desperately to find some tracks to actually follow, rather than just lurking about here in the bush looking at tiny things. Winter prism, you say, do flies bite for defense or for feeding purposes? Well, the ones that bite us are doing it for food. They are drawing blood. They're breaking the skin and sucking blood out of us, which of course is very nasty of them, and we do not appreciate their efforts. A tsetse fly, same thing. A tsetse fly, of course, is the fly that will eventually give a person sleeping sickness or trypanosomiasis, and they absolutely bite because they are trying to get food. They'll break the skin, they'll suck blood as well. So almost universally, a fly will bite in order to get food. But in the same way that your dog's teeth were designed for it to rip and tear at meat, they were also designed for defense. And so anything that can bite for food will almost certainly bite for defense as well. That assassin bug's a great example. The assassin bug will use its, and a spider in fact, the assassin bug will use its proboscis and its vicious chemicals to kill and subdue prey that it will then eat, but it will equally readily bite you if it thinks that you're attacking it. So it'll use the same equipment. Snake is the same thing. No snake bites a human being because it has the intention of eating a human being. They bite us because they're afraid of us. And so to defend themselves. Here we go. Look at this lovely feather. This is the feather of the lilac-breasted roller. And about 2 years ago, when I started doing this job, there were two viewers who used to watch us from various parts of the world, and they started off in Hawaii. It was Mike and someone else. I feel like it was Mike and Susie, but I don't know that that's true. Anyway, they promised that they would send me some exceptional Hawaiian coffee if I managed to get them one of these. And by the time I managed to find a decent feather, they'd stopped watching, or had moved on, or I don't know. And so I never got my Hawaiian coffee. Now, Mike, no, not Mike. Who was the person? Was it Lance? Lance, you want to know the biggest fly we get here? It would be one of the robber flies, Lance, and it would probably be about that big. So about 2 inches long. You don't really want to be bitten by a robber fly either. I think it would hurt quite a lot. Smallest fly would probably be one of the small mosquito species, of which there are many, of course. What else can we find through here? Herbert is on some tracks at the moment, so there he is behind us. In fact, let's go and have a look what he's got. Herbert, have you got the tracks of Karula? Why not? What have you got? Ah, a crested locust. 2 crested locusts. There we go. Yes. And a little caterpillar. There is the crested locust, aka rain locust. And they make a very loud call in the night. It sounds something like this. It sounds nothing like that, in fact, but that's the best I can do. And it's called a crested locust VM because it has a crest. Well done. Nancy H., you're wondering how long it will take a caterpillar to become butterfly. Well, you know, you'd think I'd be able to answer that question, wouldn't you? I believe that the average length is somewhere around 6 weeks. Certainly that's as long as the silkworms used to take, and I think for these acrias it's probably just longer than that. Remember, we found a whole lot of caterpillars during the TV show. I don't know if you were watching the TV show, and the TV show ran for 8 weeks, and we found some in the first week, and by the 8th week they still hadn't pupated yet. They looked like they were about to, but it's obviously longer than that. So I think it probably varies from species to species. Probably takes from as little as, say, 3 weeks all the way up, I suspect, to about 12 weeks, but it really would depend on the species that you happen to be looking at, and these acrias seem to take a whole lot longer than I thought. If there was one species that I'm pretty sure people understand and people would be able to tell you about, it would be the monarchs, of course, which are studied so heavily in North and South America. So I'm sure those monarchs have got they know very accurately how quickly they pupate. So if somebody would like to try and find that out, that would be wonderful. Tristan has managed to find himself some signal, which is excellent news, and he's also managed to find himself a large pond.
He's also found himself a large pond live.
We have indeed. We've found ourselves at Chitwa Dam, and it is very picturesque this morning. There's a multitude of different animals that are roaming about in this area. We've got the waterbuck that you see there, and these are some of my favorite antelope. A little baby waterbuck has got to be one of the cutest things in the world. They're super fluffy, and they look really, really cute, especially when they're brand new. They tend to be just this ball of fur. Now, we know that they're a waterbuck primarily because of that big white ring around the backside. It's such a diagnostic feature of a waterbuck. There's very little else that can be confused with it. You'll find that there's no sort of other animals out here that have any markings similar to that. So quite easy to sort of know that that's them. And you can see they've got that sort of long shaggy coat. And as I was saying, we're at Chitwa Dam, which is why they are here. Their name kind of gives it away that they are animals that like to spend a lot of time near and around water. And it's not because they rely on water every day like something like a hippo would. It's more that the water is a safety point for them. So if potentially lion or leopard had to come and chase them, they would try to run towards the water and utilize it as a way of getting away from potential danger. Now the problem is in this particular dam that we're at Chitwa Dam, we have some large crocodiles that are in this area, and so these waterbuck need to be a little bit careful. If they were to run into this water, they're going to have a bit of a problem, because the waterbuck...
Laura Moore, do antelope have any individually unique markings?
So, Laura Moore, you're wondering do antelope have any unique individual markings? Well, they do. So, like if you think of something like a zebra, their pattern and their striping pattern is going to be very, very, very unique to one another. It's almost like a fingerprint. And then with these waterbuck, the way that the sort of ring falls on their back end will be slightly different between each one. There'll be slightly different thicknesses. They'll meet in different places. You can see with these two, the one on the front, its circle goes all the way over the tail, whereas the one at the back end, its circle doesn't quite complete on top near its back. You see there's this little gap in it. So those will be little individual markings that the antelope will have. And it's like any animal. There's slight differences that they all have. It's just for us as people, we battle to be able to see those differences, and we end up in a situation where we don't quite recognize them, and particularly from the front there's very little change in their markings, but you'll find that there'll be little spots here and there that you could probably use. But because of the number of antelope in this area, and if you think of the impalas, there's thousands of them that we see here, so to be able to work out who is going to be very, very difficult. But it's such a picturesque scene. So Michael, you're saying, what is the difference between the color? Is one older than the other? Well, yes, there will be some sort of difference between age, and as they get older, so they start to lighten up. When they're darker, when they're younger, they tend to be a more sort of dark brown color, and the reason for that is because when they're out in an open area like this, if they lie down, the sort of browner coloration that they have tends to mean that they'll blend in a lot better with the sort of brown grass. When they're a lighter grey colour, they tend to contrast more against the grass, and it becomes much easier for a predator to see them. So only once they get to adulthood and when they're able to then evade predation do they start getting that sort of that darker coloration. And you'll also find with them is that there's also a genetic sort of difference between the two of them. So you'll find that the sort of genetic difference is that some are darker and some are lighter, much like people. Oh, and you can hear the hippos that are shouting. Now, Tracy, you're wondering what the waterbuck's tail is for. Well, it's there to basically swat away flies from its rear end. So you can see, look how it's busy wagging at the moment. That's there to sort of get rid of all the flies that will be landing there, because of the fact that they, unlike people, that they don't have toilet paper, unfortunately. There is going to be some sort of trace of smell, and that attracts the flies and it irritates them immensely, so that tail just helps to keep the flies away. It will also be able to signal sometimes if there's distress, so not so much in a waterbuck, but in something like a kudu and an impala, you'll find that they'll curl their tail up and the tail is quite light underneath, and that signals to everybody that that's the way to follow and to be able to follow one another through the bush. There's also a way of signaling when there's danger, so you'll find with the waterbuck as well as their tail will actually go quite erect, much like an elephant, and it then signals to the others that they've seen something and that the others need to be a bit careful. Now I can see way in the distance, it looks like possibly some baboons or warthogs. I can't see nicely. There, baboons. Megan, who's a new viewer. Welcome, Megan. I hope you are loving Safari Live, and it's a pleasure to have you on board with us this morning. You want to know whether waterbuck grow antlers? Well, no, they don't, and the reason why is that none of our antelope here in South Africa have antlers. There is a difference between antlers and horns. So in a waterbuck or in any of the animals that we have here, the males will grow a horn structure. Now the difference between antlers and horns is as follows. Antlers is a cartilage that grows once a year, it then falls off and will grow again the following year. Horns are a little bit different. They're a sort of bone that fuses to the skull and grows throughout the animal's life, so they'll never be without horns once they do get them. Now the reason why we don't see any horns on these animals here is because these are all females and their babies. There is no male inside here, so that's why we don't see any with horns. And look at that, isn't that amazing? We've got 3 different species in one frame. So we've got the warthog in the back there and the baboons that are also moving around in the background, and they're all kind of making hay of this sort of short grass area where there's lots of food. It's also very easy to spot predators here, so it's a perfect place if you're a herbivore to be spending a bit of time. So really nice to see multiple species together and the way that they're interacting. So Chris, you're saying they look so small. Is this angle deceiving us? Well, yes and no. So a lot of those waterbuck are very small. A lot of them are babies that are not too much bigger than the warthog itself. But there are some adults around there, and just because of the sort of distance that they're at, so you can see the one that's walking on the right-hand side now, that female right on the right-hand side, she's a little bit larger, but because of how far we are, it's flattening out the image slightly, and that's why it looks like it's the same size as the warthog. She's actually quite a bit bigger than the warthog, and then the rest of them are her babies. So some of them are very small, yes, and others, it's just this way that the camera is flattening the image out because of the distance that we're at. Now you'll see as that female waterbuck approaches closer to the young ones, you can see the size difference now. But I can tell you that a waterbuck is actually quite a large animal. It's not as small as you might think. But the big males are very, very bulky, and they'll weigh close to 500 pounds. So they're a heavy set animal and a very, very powerful animal as well. But they're busy drifting away. But like I say, it's just such a picturesque scene. We've got this beautiful dam that's rolling out in front of us, and you can see it's all stretching across the horizon here. We've got all these animals around. There's a few hippos every now and then. Now the hippos are really tough to see because at the moment most of them are under, and all we see every now and then is a little head popping up. So if we go to this dead tree right in the middle of the dam, we punch in there, there was a hippo that was lying there, and every now and then we just get this little nostril poking out. So at the base of that tree is where there is 1 or 2 hippos. So every now and then we shall maybe hopefully see one popping up. You heard them just now calling. So they're also around, and they'll be waiting for it to get a little bit warmer, and then you'll find they actually sometimes come and lie right up on the bank of this area.